This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski.
What do you do when you discover that the home you are interested in, or the home that you just bought, was involved in a horrific crime scene in the past? Sometimes it was just a few years ago, months ago. Sometimes it was decades ago. It's a very real thing. It made me start thinking about this today when I was reading about the Brian Walsh, Anna Walsh, Washington, D.C. property that's going into foreclosure because she's obviously no longer with us and he's in jail and is no money. But it was the site of not a great scene. There's a lot of homes that are not great sites of great scenes, horrible tragedies that some would say make a forever impact actually on the site itself. There's so many cases here where we have stigmatized properties. We have the King Road house that's going to be torn down in Moscow. You have the properties of Rex Heuermann. The family is living back in them. Obviously, anytime there's a crime of someone who's doing horrific things, there's a home that they once went back to. Sometimes the crimes took place on the property of those very homes as well. How does the history of a home impact the psyche of new inhabitants, especially if a tragic event like a murder took place there, if in fact the home goes back on the market to be relived in?
Yeah, I was also pondering who would want to move into Koberger's apartment, and even things like that. We have strong associational cues with places. And when we've had a wonderful visit at somebody's home or a wonderful experience out at a park or in a nature area, we always have good feelings when we go back to that place or remember that place. And the same thing is true in the reverse. When we know about something horrible that's happened somewhere, or a really evil person has been in a dwelling, if they've lived there, we never lose those associations. And it's hard to know at this point, how do you integrate that with going on and using those dwellings in some kind of a normal fashion? Another one that comes to mind is the home in Boulder, Colorado, where JonBenet Ramsey was murdered and found in the basement.
Sure.
I believe that home is still there. I think this is why we have the metaphor of the haunted house where somebody was killed. I think this is a very real thing. And I don't know that I could even get past my own emotional connections if I were to ever visit a property like that. It just feels creepy.
Yeah, one of the most famous in the country, the Amityville house. A horrible murder took the place there prior to the ghost story that we all know about it. Do properties, and I'm not trying to go all woo or spooky here, but I've heard stories before on other podcasts that I've done over the years of individuals moving into a home. They didn't even realize it was a stigmatized property or that something had happened there, a murder of some sort. They move in and there's just an energy about the place that then they start doing their research. They find out, oh God, like 4 people were murdered here. Is that something? Is there something where somebody along the lines maybe knew something but didn't really connect the dots that there was something here? What is that when people can feel that sort of an energy without necessarily even knowing that the crime took place in a stigmatized home?
Yeah, there are a lot of stories about people who have that sense of the paranormal, and that's outside the realm of anything I can really comment on or know anything about. I do know that when I was a young wife, newly married, we bought an old Victorian house because it was what we could afford, and I loved old homes, and we had fantasies of restoring it. And of course, that was way too much money, and we never did it. But I always felt ill at ease in that house, and I did find out out later that a person had died. They weren't murdered, but they had died in the home and their body had been found there. And so now, at least where I live, when a house is sold and there's been a death in the home, realtors are legally required to disclose that to new buyers, because there are a lot of people that just feel creeped out about being in a home where something awful has happened.
That's interesting. And there's even a website out there called Died in Home. And I've gone to it before when I've bought in a property. Let's just make sure nobody's died in this house.
Yeah. Associational cues are powerful. This is a real thing. And there are definitely times we get creepy vibes. And I don't think psychology has a good explanation for that. But certainly lots of people would attest to it.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Brueski.